Debate, Ayanda, it's over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Leanne. Yes, we do continue with the race debate now. South Africa has impressive rights and freedoms that are enshrined in our constitution. Now, these liberties echo Madiba's dream that all people in South Africa should live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. However, some may argue that while the letter of the law regarding redress has been developed adequately, the spirit of legislation such as black economic empowerment leaves much to be desired. A South African Institute of Chartered Accountants survey of the JSE-listed companies has revealed that South African company directors, the CEOs, the CFOs are still predominantly white and male, and that transformation for those under 40, though, is on the rise. Well, let's discuss this a little bit further. We're joined once again by AfriForum attorney Willie Spies, as well as a Black Business Council stalwart businesswoman Dr. Danisa Baloyi, and Wits media professor or journalism professor Franz Kruger to interrogate this particular topic a little bit more. Dr. Baloyi, let me perhaps start with you. Our legislation, as I said in the intro, almost second to none, but the practicality or the application thereof, what is the situation like there? Is there incorporation and transformation in corporate South Africa or South Africa Inc.?
Well, outwards, it looks like that. But I think we need to believe that we want South Africa to change. And we also need to believe that if South Africa has to work, all of us have to play a part. It is not going to help us to pretend like it is not happening. It is happening. I worked in corporate South Africa. Internationally, I worked in corporate, and I didn't see much of a difference working in America and coming to work back in South Africa, in corporate South Africa. You find that there are struggles for us to integrate and be one, for South Africans to understand that, like the old adage, if you kill that zebra, whether you shoot it on the white stripe or on the black stripe, it will die. And that's what we need to look at as South Africa. For the South African economy to move forward, we cannot sustain racism. We cannot forget the blackouts that we're talking about and screaming about, that our economy can't work because of the blackouts. But it's the people. It is the people in our economy who have to drive this economy, who have to change this economy. And if some feel I'm stuck in this position simply because I'm black, I'm overlooked. You graduate from Wits or Cape Town or Stellenbosch together, and when you get to corporate, suddenly one is better than the other. You could have graduated cum laude and you are black. When you get to corporate South Africa, the mindset is different. So my plea is that let us change that. Let us change that. And it's not hairy-fairy. I've been in corporate South Africa, so I know what is happening. And I mentor a lot of young people today who come and say, what am I to do? I do everything right, but I don't get promoted. Because of the color of my skin. Because I'm black. I'm a chartered accountant, and a chartered accountant is a chartered accountant. And a lawyer is a lawyer, Mr. Spies. You know, you use the same books. So in business, we see the same type of things. I have black and white people working with me in corporations and in the companies that we push. If we want money, we send the white guys to go get the money in the banks, because if you are black, it's a bigger struggle. So it's in our economy, it's in our society.
So blackness is associated with incompetence, with corruption, with some sort of dubious activity. Mr. Spies, is there will to change status quo? One argument suggests that the reason why we're seeing corporate South Africa is still white male dominated is because even though we have the legislation, there's no will to change the situation from our white counterparts in the corporate world.
We should be very careful to look at statistics with a specific frame of reference in mind, because I'm very concerned about the fact that we concentrate on certain statistics. We look at listed companies, which is a relatively small part of our economy. If one looks at salaries that are being paid out in the economy, the vast majority of salaries are being paid out in the public service today. A vast majority of wealth being created by the payment of salaries is in the public service. The public service is the exact opposite of what we've mentioned there. There's an underrepresentation of white people in management positions in the public service. There's an underrepresentation of Indian people in the public service. There's an underrepresentation of colored people in the public service. As I said, the vast majority of salaries today in this country is being paid out by the public service. That is happening. What is the problem? Why is it a problem? It's very dangerous for a country if the majority of income is being earned in the public service, because the public service is not a producer. The public service is not an institution that creates wealth. When Madiba spoke about empowerment 20 years ago, he said, we are not going to take away from one person and give it to the other. We are going to grow the cake. We are going to make sure that the cake grows to such an extent that no one will lose, but many people will gain.
But still, one may argue that the biggest share, or the biggest slice of the cake still belongs in the hands of the minority, even though
it's not just JSE-listed.
That is not the case. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of big salaries today are being paid to black people.
So perhaps the vast majority of salaries go to black people, but the amount of money still belongs to minority groupings.
And it's wrong, really, to look at the public sector. Because I think it's by default that the public sector should employ people. We should look at the private sector in creating and growing this economy.
Because the highest earners are white males.
I'm not focusing on the JSE. I'm focusing on just the companies in South Africa. And there are studies that have been done. We all know that the wealth of this country is still in white people. That is where we should start. How do we integrate black people into the South African economy? To say that it's not happening and it's okay, and now it's not about public sector versus private sector. It's about both of them playing a part.
Let's speak about that integration. The media plays a very critical role in integration. So I'm going to bring you in here, Professor. Speak to us about the role that the media plays in integrating South Africans, because unfortunately, one of the biggest criticism of the media in South Africa is A, that it's in white hands as well, and that B, it portrays black people either as ones who are looting, who are violent, who are criminals, and if it does show them with affluence or money, it's the bling culture. It's never someone who's sophisticated, who is cultured, who is refined, and who is still black and African. Is that a fair assumption, both on points A or B?
Thanks. And I mean, firstly, I do think it's pretty undeniable that most wealth in South Africa is still in white hands. Yes. I mean, I think to try and work one's way around that, I think doesn't take us very far. I mean, you're asking about the media. I think the media reflects the society as a whole. Both in its structure and in what we get to read. And so where there are problems that are still in the society, it would be quite surprising if those aren't reflected in the media as such. I do think that one has to be a little bit precise about what one means by the media, because the SABC is part of the media. And palpably, I think some of the criticisms that you've put forward, I mean, perhaps you do mean them to apply to the SABC, but I suspect that what you're really talking about is a narrower section, which is mainly actually the sort of mainstream print media. And even there, you know, the ownership patterns are quite complicated. Actually, we have black foreigners owning newspapers. We have, in the form of Dr. Survey, we have a black South African with a very significant stake in the print media. But you're asking about representation, and clearly, I don't think that there is one uniform picture that one can sketch across all the media at all times. I do think there are from time to time problems. I mean, before we went on air, you talked about a particular comment on a radio station about how Bafana is not working because there are too many blacks in it. I mean, clearly that's indefensible, and it's appalling that that kind of view is still out there.
Absolutely.
And actually, I have a big concern also about the kind of commentary that gets attached, particularly on websites.
Yes.
You know, at the bottom of stories, I mean, the kind of vitriolic, ugly racism that kind of gets spewed there
and
is
yet
just
media
beyond
houses
belief.
do nothing about it. Media houses, it seems there's no will to sort of censor the comments that come in, because therein, in that anonymity, you find all sorts of racial slurs, because people hide behind the social media facade that usually they won't say to your face if they meet you face to face, but it shows the racial undertones that are bubbling beneath the surface. And we'll continue to unpack this issue a little bit later. Do stay with us. A quick ad break. We'll be back with more in just a moment. And racism, and I must tell you what's happening behind the scenes. Every now and again, the panelists take a look at the monitor to my left to see what's happening with the live cricket action on the go. So it just shows just what a unifying factor sports can be. But oftentimes issues of transformation in sport also threaten to bring about a racial undertone. So that's a topic we're going to be exploring in the last hour of the show. But at the moment, we're taking a look at corporate South Africa and the media to bring us some information as to what it looks like in terms of demographics and color and race relations. Beginning of the show from 6 to 7, we were speaking of issues of racism in schools and in other areas of society. But right now, let's go back to corporate world and whether or not there's racism there. Let me come back to you, Mr. Spies. You said a little bit earlier that the way in which South Africa is seeking to redress perhaps some of the legislation, that it leaves much to be desired from your point of view. Are you saying that it's reverse racism? And my follow-up question is, do you believe black people can be racist?
I do not want to speak on behalf of black people. I think one need, in order to make your views clear, you need to walk in the shoes of another person. I do not know what black people experience, but it very often happens that black people do not often know what white people experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story. We acted for a lady, a white lady. She wanted to be a police officer, and she developed up to the rank of captain, and she applied for promotion. Brilliant police woman. Her life dream was to become a senior police officer. She complied with every single requirement. She completed every single course. She was rated the best in all the interviews that were done. At the end, the job that was advertised was kept vacant rather than to fill the job with a white female candidate. So the decision maker said we should rather keep a job vacant than filling it with a white person. That lady, her name is Renata Barnard. She was assisted by Solidarity all the way up to the Constitutional Court. And unfortunately, she finally lost the case. The Constitutional Court said it's okay that a job is being left vacant rather than to fill it with a white person. Her perception is that this is a racist dispensation. It's the only deduction she can draw from the experience that she had. Regardless of what we say, regardless of all the theory, what people experience is institutionalized racism, and we need to find ways to address that.
Dr. Bello?
You know, black people find themselves as Renatas on a daily basis. It's fact, you know, and but as South Africa, we've tried this formula of racism. It hasn't worked. It has failed. We have to dump it. We really have to. If we are to bequeath a South Africa that will work in the future to our children, we as black South Africans, and I'm glad you're saying can speak on for black people, because most of the time we are told, oh, apartheid is gone, don't talk about it, don't go back, let's move forward. Part of me agree with that, but I still believe it's South African black people who need to understand or decide when they have to forget about it. And you know why? Because they still find themselves in areas that are not palatable as we change. Because I'm one of those people who says, I don't care how good the president or this government is. They can't change everything overnight. It will come bits and pieces. So we have to be patient. But who has to be patient? It's black people. And as he talks to the community that he knows, I talk to the community that I know. You go to church and people tell you their stories about how their lives are not changing fast enough. But they are patient. If black people were not patient, South Africa would be in flames. So if you go back to the question you asked him earlier, are black people racist? They can be racist maybe, but they do not have the power to exercise it. They don't own the banks. They don't control the economy. And how do they effectively make racism work?
Do you believe that we conceded perhaps too much in the transition into democracy? I'm going to take a look at corporate South Africa and the fact that the medium of instruction there and how we do business is not in isiZulu or isiXhosa or Setswana. And in fact, if you can't speak English, you're frowned upon as being unintelligent, as someone who's a little bit backward. Should we have perhaps even in schools made it compulsory for our white counterparts to know a language like Setswana, Sepedi, what have you? Because if you were in France, you have to learn how to speak French if you're going to conduct business there.
Yes, language is power. I speak almost all South African languages, all of them. So I feel I'm more empowered. I can't walk into any debate and not understand what people are saying, whether they speak in Afrikaans, Xhosa, or I understand it. And I think it is power to understand languages. What you are talking about is part of the problem. You've got to conform. And who has to conform in most cases? It's black people. Black people have to conform. They have to behave a certain way. When they are in corporate South Africa, they have to speak a certain way. I mean, the other day there was a commentator on on the budget, and he had an accent that came from Limpopo. And the children were asking, is it Tsonga? And I said, yes, it's Tsonga, and that comes from his intonation, the way he spoke. But is it wrong? Is he making the facts? Is he making the points? Do we have to change? If you go to other countries, if they are Arabs, they speak in Arabic.
It's true. But let me bring you into the fray in about 30 seconds or so, because we do have to wrap. The fact that on social media platforms, and you raise this issue, we are seeing people come to the fore and to express their prejudices. Is that such a bad thing? Or is that sort of a litmus test to show us where we are as a country? Is it people seeking perhaps attention or notoriety on Twitter, or is it a symptom of a deeper problem?
Well, it is a symptom of a deeper problem, and I suppose in some senses it's good to be reminded that those problems still persist. And I mean, earlier on we were saying how important it is to put these things on the table and to discuss them. So, I mean, I suppose there's one way of looking at it, to say at least we know, what's out there, but it's a very unconstructive way of putting those things out there. I mean, just on the language question in one line, I mean, I do think we need to build all the languages of South Africa much more. That's a truth in the media as much as anywhere.
Oh, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so very much for joining us. It is time for us to say goodbye to our SABC2 viewers. But remember, if you do have access to DSTV, you can join us on channel 404, where this discussion continues. Thank you so much for having joined us.